Tonight, Hurricane Ian has made landfall in Southwest Florida. And for everyone here at Football Insiders and Pro Football Network, we want to send our thoughts and prayers to all of those affected in the hurricane's path. What we really want to make sure about is that if you're in the hurricane's path, that you're safe, you're secure, you're listening to your local officials on advice on what to do. And for those of you who are safe and secure, and those of you who may have family or friends affected by this, we hope that tonight, in some small way, Football Insiders can give you just a little bit of levity, just a little bit of escape from the seriousness of the situation. And there is nobody, and I mean nobody, better to help us do that when we talk about all things football, all things NFL, than Pro Football Network senior NFL analyst Trey Wingo.
Yeah, Brett, thank you very much. By the way, our good friend Matt Canada, who was with us at Pro Football Network, posted a really scary video. It was his sister-in-law's house, where a tree absolutely came down and just crushed them. Thankfully, everybody was safe, but there's significant damage. I have a lot of friends of mine who have homes in the area, and the storm surge is already over 8 feet. And their houses are at 12 feet above sea level. There's going to be significant damage from this storm. There's no question about it. So thoughts and prayers for everybody that's felt the brunt of this storm. It's the Gulf side of the state of Florida. And we'll see how it affects the football side of it. Because once again, for those that don't know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are supposed to play a home game against Kansas City Chiefs, which is a really interesting game in a lot of ways. But the NFL over the years has done a really good job, Brett, of making sure they don't put a burden on a city or a region or a state where there is a natural disaster. And they've rerouted a lot of games for that reason, whether it's wildfires or hurricanes. There's a million of reasons out there you can see. And the contingency plan from the NFL right now, because the Vikings and Saints play in London early Sunday morning, is that if there's an issue, then they cannot play the game in Tampa for whatever reason. That game will be in Minnesota because, again, as we said, the Vikings are playing the Saints in London. As of right now, the plan is still to hold that game in Tampa Bay, but clearly those plans could change depending on the track of the storm.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons, the Dolphins are on the road in Cincinnati playing tomorrow night. But one of the reasons why they're not staying in Florida and Miami is because, as you said, the NFL doing a really good job of not putting any burden on the resources for anywhere in the state of Florida. So all of that can be diverted to the Gulf area. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the schedule. We'll keep everybody posted. If anything were to break while we're live on the air, we'll certainly bring that to you as it comes up. But Trey, as we like to start all of our shows here, it's time to learn. It is time to learn. Week 3 has come and gone, and now it's time as we prep for week 4 to see what we learned from week 3. And the first game, Trey, that really was something we previewed in last week's show, and we certainly got our money's worth, was the Miami Dolphins taking on the Buffalo Bills. And Trey, the question here is this: who did we learn more about? Did we learn more about the Miami Dolphins, or did we learn more about Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills?
Well, before we get into that, let's just take a bigger picture here, right? Through 3 weeks of the season, we have 2 undefeated teams, the Miami Dolphins and the Philadelphia Eagles. That's only the second time in the last 34 seasons we've had only 2 undefeated teams after 3 weeks. And so if you tell me you had the Dolphins and the Eagles as the only 3-0 teams, I'm going to channel my inner Ron Burgundy and say, I don't believe you. You are lying to me right now. But kudos to them for getting it done. I think the question of who we learned more about, the Dolphins or the Bills, I have to say Miami, because there's no way they should have won that game, Brett. Just like I want to throw in a couple of numbers at you. The Bills had 90 offensive plays. The Dolphins had 39. The Bills held the ball for over 40 minutes. 40 minutes and 20 seconds. The Dolphins obviously held it for less than 20 minutes. So the Bills held it for more than 2/3 of the game, ran more than double the plays of the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins still found a way to win that game.
Yeah.
Now, all of that being said, I think this, along with another game, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is a classic example of how most NFL games are lost rather than won.
That's the point.
And before the TuneOn conspiracy theorists come at the comments,
They're coming for you. You know they're coming for you now.
I want to be clear. You never give back a win. You earned it. There are no style points. There's no artistic impression or artistic merit in an NFL game. Either you freaking win the game or you lose the game. So Miami, kudos to you. That's 3-0 in the win column. But how many times do you think the Dolphins are going to play the Bills, and the Bills are going to have more than twice the plays and more than two times the time of possession, and only score 19 points, and only 2 of those points came off a butt punt, by the way, and they're going to win the game? Like, if you play that game 100 times out of 100, the Miami Dolphins lose that game based on those numbers 98 times out of 100. So kudos to them for finding a way to get it done when their quarterback was or was not concussed, and there's a joint NFL and NFLPA investigation to make sure that protocols were followed. Like, there's so many crazy things that went on in that game. The Bills OC Ken Dorsey having an epic meltdown in the booth after Josh Allen and company ran out the clock, basically, by not getting the right play call. So I'll give the Dolphins all the credit in the world.
Yeah.
But classic example of how a game is lost rather than it's won.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think that you walk away from this game, Trey, with any sort of shift in power dynamics. No. Although what you say is the Dolphins, they did everything they needed to do and less and won the game. The one thing I'll point out that I walked away with interesting was one of the lowest air yards per attempt for Josh Allen in his career, and among the lowest for the week of all quarterbacks at only 5.7. Air yards per attempt. And so clearly
that's significant.
Yeah. Clearly the Dolphins defensive strategy was, as we know, limit those big plays. Don't let them score in one play, have them extend those drives. It was almost like the rope-a-dope strategy. Let them tire themselves out. Maybe it worked. But we'll see. Definitely.
By the way, before we move on from that, something to consider, because the Dolphins are playing Thursday night at Cincinnati. We've never had a team in NFL history have their defense on the field for 90 plays and then play 4 days later. The only thing that's come close was in the COVID year of 2020, even though technically, I guess we're not still out of the COVID years, but in the COVID season of 2020, where most places didn't allow fans and the regulations were very strict, the Saints defense was on the field on a Sunday for 92 plays. And then played on Friday, Christmas Day, which was 5 days later. And thanks to Alvin Kamara's 6 touchdown on the ground, a single game tying record, even though he should have had 7. I don't know why Sean Payton pulled him out of the game there late and gave some to Taysom Hill. Oh, wait, because he loved Taysom in a really weird way. And they rolled the Minnesota Vikings 52-33. So we've never had a team, their defense, be on the field for 90 plays and then play 4 days later. I think that's a real thing to watch out for the Thursday night game in Cincinnati, because not only was it 90 plays, it was 90 plays in the South Florida heat. And, I'm curious to see what, if anything, the Dolphins defense has left in the tank on such a short turnaround.
Yeah, they're not going against schlubs, right? They're going against Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. So we'll see how that plays out. I have a feeling that QB matchup may come up in a future segment on the show. But let's look ahead. And by the way, as we talk about what we learned more about Caesar Sportsbook in terms of Super Bowl odds, the Bills are still the betting favorite at plus 450, and the Dolphins are still at plus 1600. So the odds have not really moved that much closer there. And we'll talk about where you can place your bets on that in just a little bit. But as we look to the second team in the conversation that we want to talk about is, who did we learn more about, Trey? The Kansas City Chiefs in their loss, or the Indianapolis Colts in their surprising victory?
I think we learned more about the Colts.
Ooh.
And no, in not a good way.
Oh, okay.
They're terrible. Okay. Their defense was pretty good, but Matt Ryan looks awful. Let's just be honest about it. I think he has 8 lost fumbles through the first 3 games of the season. It's either 8 or 7. My pick for him as the comeback player of the year, not looking good. Let me just give you an example to bounce off what we just said about the Bills-Dolphins game. That game could not have been lost more by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Colts' first touchdown was off a muffed punt by Sky Moore. The second punt by the Colts, Sky Moore could not find that ball anywhere. The Chiefs missed 4 points in the kicking game, a missed extra point and a missed field goal. They later, on a 4th and 11, decided for a fake field goal in the fourth quarter, as opposed to putting them where they would have been up by 3. Call me crazy. If I'm going for it on 4th down, I want Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, not the Scottish Hammer, their punter. They had a situation at the end of the game where on what turned out to be the Colts' game-winning drive, they ended it with a sack on 3rd and 8 that would have made it 4th and 15. And then Chris Jones, dear God, had to have said the most unspeakable things to Matt Ryan for that flag to be called. I got to tell you, I effing hated that call essentially turned the outcome of the game, because Chris Jones didn't physically confront Matt Ryan. He didn't bump into him. He didn't bump heads with him. It was a verbal thing that one of the referees said. And the worst part about it is that Chris Jones isn't going to talk about it, and the refs won't tell us what he said.
I was just going to say,
like, if what he said was that bad, as the referees in the NFL, you need to tell us what he said so that every player knows this is what you cannot say. Yeah. I'm not saying I want to be clear. I'm not excusing Chris Jones. I'm not saying that by the letter of the law, that flag should not have been thrown. But if what he said was so unspeakably vile that it required a 15-yard penalty for taunting, you need to let everybody know this is exactly what you cannot say, because there was no physical confrontation. There was no bumping of body parts in any way, shape, or form between Chris Jones and Matt Ryan. So if what he said was so incredibly awful, you need to let everybody know this is the line. This is the threshold that you cannot say. That had to be a very long plane ride home for Chris Jones. I don't know if I've seen a game in more recent memory where a team has said, please take this. Take this game. We do not want it. And let's add in the fact that Travis Kelce, who's one of the surest players in the game, dropped a touchdown pass that would have ended the game for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was the same, by the way, it was the same pattern and the same play that Mahomes hit Kelce on in the divisional round when they won the playoff game against the Bills in overtime on that first drive. It's literally the exact same play. So I'm not going to ever think that Kelce's going to drop that pass again, that Chris Jones is going to say the worst thing again, that they're going to miss 4 points in the kicking game, and then muff a punt that gave the Colts the ball at the 4-yard line for their first touchdown. The Chiefs could not have done more to gift wrap that game for Indianapolis. So the reason why I say we learn more about the Colts is I just don't think they're good at all.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that game illustrated all the ways a bad team can win a game in the NFL, right?
Correct.
That's all that happened there.
And a good team can lose a game.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't even talked about the Eric Bieniemy, Patrick Mahomes
scuffle,
which I think is a real thing. They all downplayed it, but
it's happened too many times, Trey, to say.
Brett, not only that, but let's be honest about it. Like, Eric Bieniemy was on an expiring contract last season as the offensive coordinator, and they waited very late in the offseason to bring him back, okay? So when Patrick Mahomes starts openly venting his frustration with how the offense is being called, and Patrick Mahomes is potentially earning $500 million on his contract, which we'll never see, but he's going to get a new contract either after this season or next season, which will make him more money.
Yeah.
Where do you think the Chiefs are siding as a team? with their franchise quarterback who set every record possible through his first 4 seasons as a starter, or Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, who came back on a 1-year contract after an expiring contract last year. This is going to go the way of Patrick Mahomes. It's just a matter of when. It's a matter of sooner rather than later. The Chiefs are going to side with their franchise quarterback. And there are real reasons why Eric Bieniemy is not a head coach in the NFL. You talk to a lot of players who have dealt with him over the years in Kansas City, and they'll tell you, yeah, it's great, but. But. Like, for example, Super Bowl 54, when the Chiefs were down 10 points in the fourth quarter. It was 3rd and 17. Key play of the game. And NFL Films has Patrick Mahomes going over the sidelines, and he says to Eric Bieniemy, do we have time to throw wasp? Eric Bieniemy didn't call that play. Patrick Mahomes suggested that play. And that was, of course, the double move by Tyreek Hill. Patrick Mahomes, when he said time, meaning can I have enough time with this big pass rush by the 49ers, dropped back 13 steps and heaved it 50-plus yards in the air, his longest throw of the season, to a wide-open Tyreek Hill that went on to led to the first touchdown of that fourth quarter that allowed them to run away with the game. So there's a real issue between Mahomes and Bieniemy, even though everybody in Kansas City is now trying to downplay it because they don't want to create a controversy. But it's there and it's real. And at the end of the day, it's just a matter of when the Chiefs are siding with Mahomes as opposed to Bieniemy.
Yeah, interesting to note that when Andy Reid stepped in between the two of them, he went right to Mahomes and very calmly walked away with him. So very, very astute observation. And yeah, look, the Chris Jones situation, again, I couldn't agree more. I would love to know what he said because they
have to tell us. They have to tell us. Right?
Trey, they used the term abusive. The referees did. They said what he said was abusive. I mean, that's a pretty telling charge for a player there.
Yeah, that's the whole thing the last couple of years where they've said they really want to cut down taunting. Well, then tell me what it was he said that was so abusive that you felt it needed to change the outcome of the game. Yep, and again, the Chiefs had every opportunity to stop them after that, and they didn't. It ended up being an 8+ minute drive by the Colts that ended up winning the game. But the game was essentially over at that point. The game was over. And then the referees decided to step in and make that call. And if you're going to make that call that is so impactful on the outcome of the game, you need to tell us what it was that was that awful.
Yeah. And again, Caesar Sportsbook, by the way, the odds have pretty much stayed a little bit stable here. The Colts beating the Chiefs didn't change anything significantly for either team. The Chiefs odds to win the Super Bowl, Caesar Sportsbook, are plus 800. The Colts a whopping plus 3,500. That's in line with how Trey feels about their success as well.
They're not winning the Super Bowl.
They are not winning the Super Bowl. There's not even a chance, as my friends at Dumb and Dumber might say. So into our third game here, our final game of the Time to Learn segment, our first segment of the show here, Trey. The other game is the Jaguars, maybe surprisingly, but maybe not after this game, surprisingly beating the Los Angeles Chargers. Same question, Trey. Who did we learn more about here? Did we learn that the Jaguars may be for real? Or did we learn that the Chargers may have a few more problems than otherwise anticipated?
Well, I think because of the way the injury situation has sort of worked its way out for the Chargers, I think the most accurate way to say is we learned a lot about both of them. But I do think that we learned a lot more about Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is trending in the right direction. It's amazing what happens when you have an actual head coach.
We spent a lot of time last year, Trey, talking about Urban Meyer, right?
And an actual coaching staff who knows what the hell they're doing and is invested in the game of professional football, as opposed to just, wanting to be in Columbus to watch out and live off his Ohio State days in Urban Meyer. I'm sorry, Urban Meyer was a trash head coach in the NFL. That's never going to change, and people need to understand that. What I love about Jacksonville, and the reason I say this, is that you're seeing exactly what you want a team to do. They were bad early in that loss to the Commanders. They learned from those mistakes, and they've gone 2-0 since that time. But more importantly, look at the maturation and the progression of Trevor Lawrence. Take every other quarterback that was taken last year in the first round of that draft. Mac Jones is injured, may not see the field much at all going forward in this season. Trey Lance is out for the entire season with a fractured ankle. Justin Fields is last in almost every significant category when it comes to playing quarterback in the NFL. And then you have Trevor Lawrence, who is doing amazing things. I think we learned a lot about Jacksonville, and we learned a lot about the benefit of real coaching. But I have to say, if you'll give me a moment here.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed in Brandon Staley in that game because you have a quarterback in Justin Herbert, who everybody agrees is a phenomenal talent, a generational talent, a guy that you want as your quarterback to lead your franchise for 12 to 14 years. He entered that game with fractured rib cartilage, and we talked about this last week. The legitimate heal time for fractured rib cartilage is 4 to 6 months. Hashtag the rest of the season. So he's not going to be right until 2023. That's a given. So what in the hell are you doing having Justin Herbert with fractured rib cartilage drop back on 80% of your snaps? That's a red flag to begin with. Let's take it one step further. When it's 31-10 in the fourth quarter and the game is out of reach, when it's 38-10 in the fourth quarter, when the game is out of reach, what in the hell is Justin Herbert doing playing in that football game? The game is over. It's done. There's nothing you can do to win that game. So why are you putting at risk your franchise quarterback for no apparent reason? Yep. And after the game, Brandon Staley was asked about that. I want to be clear. I like Brandon Staley. I think he's a good head coach. And I think he has the potential to take the Chargers team where they need to be, although they are just decimated by injuries right now. The latest is Joey Bosa. Having groin surgery. He's going to miss the next 4 weeks. Rashawn Slater is out for the season. J.C. Jackson is missing all kinds of time because
big
of an
free
ankle
agent
injury.
acquisition for them too, right? J.C. Jackson.
Right. But after the game, Brandon Staley said this. It was Justin Herbert who wanted to go back in. He was adamant about the decision.
Yeah.
Time out.
Throwing the flag there.
You're the freaking head coach of the NFL. You have all the power. You can usurp a player's desires at any point that you want to because you have that authority. So don't give me this bullshit that you're saying, oh, well, Justin Herbert was adamant about going in. It is your job to protect the player from himself, and you failed miserably. I did something for the 33rd Team Sunday with Eric Mangini, my good friend and a head coach of the Jets and the Browns and a longtime coach in the NFL, about that. And he said, Trey, there was a situation in Cleveland many years ago where I wanted to win the game, and this player told me he was good, and I put him back in. And I realized at that point that I had no business putting him back in the game because he was hurt beyond belief, and it was my job to protect him. Brandon Staley failed at that miserably. Now, I'm not going to say that means he's a terrible head coach. I'm just saying that he failed in a really important responsibility. As a head coach, it is your job to come up with a game plan, execute the game plan. More importantly, manage the game in situations, as in know when to use your challenges, know when to use your timeouts, know what play calls you want in certain situations. And most importantly, it's your job to protect the player from himself, because 98% of the players will say, I'm good, coach. I'm good. Let me in. I'm fine. I'm good to go. It is your responsibility to understand when the game is over. Herm Edwards used to tell me that about when RG3 got hurt when he was the Cleveland Browns quarterback. And like he got nailed running down the sideline instead of running out of bounds. And he said, know when the journey is over. Brandon Staley needs to understand when the journey was over for the Chargers on Sunday. Those fractured rib cartilage thing, it's not getting better. Like, he will not be right until 2023. Yep. So the fact that you're exposing him to unneeded and unwanted and unnecessary hits in the fourth quarter of a game when you're either down by 21 or 28, bro, you failed. you failed as a head coach in the NFL, and you need to be better than that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say anything else about it because you said everything. Hopefully he has the same lesson that your friend Eric Mangini had, comes to the realization that can't do that again. Let's take a quick look at the odds there. You know, the Jaguars got to see a little bit of a bump, it looks like, over at Caesar Sportsbook, but no one's still really believing in them, Trey. Their Super Bowl odds are still plus 6,000. Even higher than the Colts. So it'll be interesting as they continue to prove themselves. We'll keep an eye on their Super Bowl odds. And the Chargers have dropped considerably down to plus 2,200. And guys,
the Chiefs are running away with the AFC West. Just understand that.
And that was the thing we looked at right at the beginning of the season is, you know, did the rest of the West do what they needed to do to keep up with the best? And that's the Kansas City Chiefs. So what we'll look at is where you can go bet on those odds, guys, is as we said, Caesar Sportsbook. And all you have to do is place your first cash wager. And if you lose, you'll get 100% of your stake back as a free bet. That's up to $1,250. So win or lose, you're also going to get a $1,000 reward, 1,000 reward credits and 1,000 tier credits. And the easiest thing you have to do is just click the link in the comments. Okay. And you're going to enter promo code PFNFULL. This is Trey's favorite part when I spell it out. You're going to enter promo code PFNFULL. And you're going to get that link in the comments. All you got to do. And that's over at Caesars Sportsbook. Now, Trey, moving on to segment 2 here, we had a exclusive PFN report from our very own Aaron Wilson looking into the situation in Las Vegas. We just mentioned that the Chiefs are going to run away with the AFC West this year. And in large part, that's because the Raiders are sitting there as the only winless team at 0-3. Following that week 3 loss to the Titans there, they had a players-only meeting. Separately, Mark Davis has met privately with Josh McDaniels and the GM there. And what Aaron did in his report, and you can read the full report at profootballnetwork.com. You can find it in our Twitter feed. Our social guy is going to link it right on Twitter right now if you're following, so you can go read the report. But in there, Trey, what really was the resounding message is they internally don't really believe this to be a culture problem. There's a lot of passing the buck on the personnel issues that they saw last year, Trey, that they overperformed with interim coach Rick Bisaccia to get to the playoffs, and that they still need to make improvements to the roster. Is that how you see it looking in? Or given Josh McDaniels' history in Denver, do we need to be worried about a culture problem?
Well, I still to this day do not understand why Rich Bisaccia didn't get a real opportunity to have that job. Because just so people understand, when the Raiders changed head coaches midseason, and again, I want to be clear, it was weird circumstances because normally when you change a head coach in the middle of the season, it's because the team sucks and you want to move on. And the Raiders were not that last year. It was really external things that were very weird, including the email scandal from Washington that somehow strafed John Gruden in Vegas. But they were the first team ever who had a change of head coach in a regular season and made it to the postseason. And they had a very good opportunity to win that first postseason game against the Cincinnati Bengals in the wild card round. So I'll never understand why they didn't get Rich Bisaccia or give Rich Bisaccia a better opportunity to win that job. All that being said, this is who the Raiders are. It's who they've always been, and it's who they continue to be. And Josh McDaniels, for all of his great success as a member of the New England Patriots, is repeating the same mistakes he made in Denver the first time he got a head coaching job. When they had, Brandon Marshall was there. And I'm trying to think who the quarterback was. Oh, was it who was the quarterback when he
Jay
was
Cutler?
There? No, it was before Jay Cutler.
Oh, was that Plummer?
No, it was after Jay. It was the in between before Jay Cutler and after Jake Plummer. Oh, it was Kyle Orton. It was Kyle Orton. That's who it was. It was Kyle Orton. But anyway, My good buddy Mark Schlereth, whom you know very well, and we've had him on More Than Football here on Pro Football Network.
Stink is the best, Trey. And then you have a Spotify live show with him, right?
Every Monday night, 6:00 Eastern on Spotify Live. He basically said Josh is sort of reliving the same mistakes he made in Denver. He's a very authoritative guy, doesn't relate well with players.
Yeah.
And you need to, in this day and age, you need to relate to the players better. And that's something that Josh is failing. But Josh is another example of so many coaches who are brilliant offensive minds, like Nathaniel Hackett, for example, the head coach of the Denver Broncos, Mike Martz, when he was the head coach of the Rams. Like, you can be a brilliant offensive mind and come up with incredible plays, but when you're the head coach, that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's about managing the game and being a game manager, as in when to use timeouts, when to throw your challenges, when to use situational football to your advantage. And I'll give you a great example. Nick Sirianni, who got the job in Philadelphia because of his ability to call plays, realized, and by the way, the Eagles are one of only two teams in the NFL, 3-0, realized that for him to be the best head coach he could be, he could no longer call plays, because that's an all-encompassing thing. You can have the greatest ideas and thoughts about plays, and this works against that defense, and this doesn't work against that defense, and we can exploit this weakness or we can exploit that weakness. But it's about when you choose to use them and when you choose to implement those things, and how you manage a 2-minute situation, how you manage red zone situations, how you manage your timeouts, how you manage your challenges. If you don't do that right, you can be the most brilliant mind in the world, and it doesn't matter. Yep. A head coach's job, when it's all said and done, is not to call crazy plays and draw up amazing things. It's to maximize your team's chances to win the fucking game.
Yep.
And
absolutely,
sometimes people get lost in the weeds of all that other stuff that doesn't matter. And you get caught up in the things about a play as opposed to in, okay, where are we in the game? And what do I need to do to make sure I give my team the best opportunity to win? And I feel like Josh McDaniels right now in Vegas is repeating a lot of the mistakes he made with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and it's a telling situation. In addition to the players only meeting, Mark Davis, the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, also met privately alone with the coaching staff. And
well, I think that might say more about Mark Davis than it does about the coaching staff.
Well, sure, yeah.
About that,
I think it's something you obviously have to keep an eye out for all the reasons we talked about, why Urban Meyer failed, right? Or why other Belichick disciples seem to not do so well. It's like you said, there's a skill set for being an offensive play caller. There's a skill set for being a head coach, and leadership, leading other grown men to follow you into battle, is that number one skill set. So we'll see if Josh McDaniels is able to do that. Like I said, guys, the full report, chock full of exclusive inside information, exclusively reported by Aaron Wilson for Pro Football Network, can be found at profootballnetwork.com. You can find the link in our Twitter feed at PFN365. All the info is there. Certainly a situation we're going to keep an eye on as the 0-3 Las Vegas Raiders try to fight their way back into contention before the season truly gets away for them. Trey, we're going to move into our third segment here, and this is very quickly becoming not just my favorite of the show, but also our audience. And this is our Super Smash QB matchups of the week. And this week, in week 4, we have 3 really good ones. I told our producer, don't tell me what's coming. Let's just see what the selector spits out.
Oh, dear God.
Go. So
all right, here we go.
Goat versus baby goat, Trey.
This is very interesting. First of all, as we alluded to off the top, we don't know where this game is going to be played. As we do this live on Wednesday night at 8:35 p.m. Eastern, they're still hoping to play it in Tampa. But if the situation devolves at all, they're going to play this game in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to get into in this game. All right. First of all, it is a Super Bowl rematch. Right? Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl 55. The Bucs won 31-9. As we all know, Tom Brady is the GOAT for every reason, and he's 7-3 in a Super Bowl. However, in the regular season, he is only 6-6 in rematches of games that he's played against a quarterback he played in the postseason.
What a nugget of information.
In the Super Bowl. No, and here it gets better. It gets better, right? He's 5-0 against Matt Ryan. He's 1-6 against everybody else.
Oh,
in terms of Patrick Mahomes. Matt Ryan is just getting his ass kicked right now.
You're killing him tonight, Trey. You're killing him tonight.
And I like Matt Ryan. Guest on Half Forgotten History. Matt, we love you. I appreciate it. But here's another amazing thing about this game, which I think is very interesting. As we said, the Chiefs could not have found more ways to lose that game to the Colts. They gifted it to them. Otherwise, they'd be 3-0 right now. The Bucs defense is the leading scoring defense in the NFL. They're giving up only 9 points a game. Andy Reid, the head coach of the Chiefs, throughout his career, which includes the Eagles, weirdly is 9-2 as a head coach when facing the top scoring defense in the NFL.
Wow.
And let's take it one step further. In those games against the number one scoring defense in the NFL, his teams, whether it's the Eagles or the Chiefs, have averaged 26.2 points per game scored. So what I'm telling you is that the Chiefs with Andy Reid do not care that Patrick Mahomes and company should be limited to 9 points per game, because historically, Andy Reid's teams way overperformed that. And the Bucs are a hot mess on offense. They've only scored 42 points offensively through 3 games. That is basically 14 points per game. They averaged 30.5 points last year, second highest scoring offense in the NFL. And they have all kinds of issues. And they're going to get Mike Evans back. I understand that. But they still have all kinds of continuity issues. And people can pretend like the offensive line doesn't matter. But much in the same way the offensive line was the biggest reason why the Chiefs lost to the Patriots, the Bucs in Super Bowl 55, is the biggest reason the offense for the Bucs is struggling. Ryan Jensen is out. Ali Marpet retired. Alex Kappa is now a Cincinnati Bengal. The interior front of that offensive line for the Bucs, which was a strength for them in 20 and 21, is now an absolute weakness for them.
And we know that's where Tom Brady hates to get pressure from.
Correct. Well, no quarterback likes pressure up the middle. Like, no quarterback's going to say, yes, please run at me right up the first 3 positions on the offensive line. That doesn't exist. But I will tell you this, and I've said this to you before, I think this is the most complete team the Chiefs have had around Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like, their defensive line is really good with Carlos Dunlap and Frank Clark and Chris Jones when he's not saying the most vile things to a quarterback you can possibly say. You know, adding Kalen Saunders, who is a really good plug-and-play player for them. Mike Dana, who is really, really good. Nick Bolton, the linebacker they got out of Missouri a couple of years ago.
Steal in the draft.
Absolute steal. I think that the Chiefs can make things difficult for the Bucs offensively. The question then becomes, can the Chiefs score enough offensively against a really, really, really good defense? Like Vita Vea, I don't know if you saw this last week, dropped back in coverage in a goal line situation at 350 pounds. And I think when Aaron Jones caught a pass out of the backfield, or maybe it was Dylan, I think it was Aaron Jones, he rocked him so hard that he fumbled. Like
the fumble, yeah.
The defense of the Bucs is real and it's spectacular, but I do think the Chiefs can exploit it, and I do think like the Chiefs are going to probably come out of this game with a win.
Yeah, Trey, I think it's, as we look at the matchup overall, not many times do we say this about Tom Brady in the 74 2,000 years he's been playing in the NFL, where he's got to think about keeping up with the guy across the field from him.
He looks bad. He looks old.
He does. He
looks old.
Look, we know he's got a lot going on. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how that matchup unfolds. By the way, on Underdog, our friends at Underdog Fantasy, you can get Patrick Mahomes. His higher or lower in their pick'em game is 289.5 yards, almost 300 yards against this great Bucs defense that Trey pointed out. I'll have to think long and hard about that one before I play that on Underdog. So we'll see. But my good friend Brian, let's throw up the next QB selector. Let's see where the selector is going to take us for the next QB matchup in Week 4. Tua Tagovailoa and defending AFC champion Joe Burrow. Trey, we talked a little bit about Tua, right? And the Dolphins, and what did we learn against their game in the Bills? And Joe Burrow and the Bengals got right back on the right side of things against the Jets. What are your thoughts on this game? Is Tua up in that category where we think he can keep pace back-to-back weeks with a Josh Allen and then a Joe Burrow?
The Dolphins offense did not play well in that win over Miami, over the Bills. Let's just be clear about that. They didn't play very well. My bigger concern in this game is about whether or not the Dolphins defense is going to show up. We talked about this. Like, we can have the matchup of the quarterbacks, and I understand that's what everyone talks about. But Joe Burrow looked like Joe Burrow last week against the Jets. Granted, it was against the Jets. I understand that. But it does feel like the bigger test in this game is going to be about that Dolphins defense and how much they have in the tank after being on the field for 90 games in that heat and playing, as we said off the top, in 4 days rest. I know that Joe Burrow is that guy. Right? Like he's that dude.
He's a potential serial killer using his talents for good.
Well, as we said earlier on the show, there's no question about that. The bigger concern for me in this game is the Dolphins defense. Like, we can have the Tua discussion. And by the way, there's real questions about whether or not Tua should even play in this game.
Yeah, that's a huge thing about this.
After what happened, like, I do appreciate how hard the Dolphins are caping to say that it was a back injury as opposed to a head injury. Yeah. But when he left the game, they said it was a head injury. Then when he came back, they said it was a back injury. And that's why the NFL and the NFLPA are both jointly investigating a review of whether or not the concussion protocols were followed here. Because to the naked eye, it certainly looked like it was a neurological issue and not a back issue for Tua.
Yeah.
So look, the Dolphins defense, to me, more than anything else in this matchup on Thursday night, is going to be the deciding factor, depending on what they have left in the tank. Burrow is great. Tua's played great. To me, neither of those quarterbacks are the swing issue in this game on Thursday night.
Really interesting. I agree with you. Not often we say that about a QB matchup. The names are there. I mean, look, Tua was like one of the number one talked thing about on sports shows the last couple days after that game. But we try to keep it real with you every week here on Football Insiders. And the real football thing about this game is not the quarterbacks. It's the defenses.
It's the defense of Miami.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to our final QB matchup of Week 4. Throw it up. By land or by air, Trey, that's what these two quarterbacks in this matchup bring to the field. Josh Allen coming off a rough look. That last throw, by the way, on 4th down before the clock ran out, but the previous drive that he buried into the dirt, not great. And Lamar Jackson coming off he's leading the league in touchdown passes with 10. This is a great matchup of what may be the two most physically gifted, besides Patrick Mahomes, quarterbacks in the NFL. Is this a matchup where the quarterbacks really are going to be the key factors here?
I think they have to be. You mentioned Lamar with 10 touchdown passes, most in the NFL. Josh Allen with 9 right behind him. This ties the record for the most touchdown passes between two starting quarterbacks in NFL history in a Week 4 game. So we got 19 combined. By the way, no small coincidence, these are the top two guys on Caesar Sportsbook to be the MVP of the NFL. Josh started the year at plus 650. He's now done a plus 300. And Lamar has made an amazing jump from plus 800 to now plus 700 for the league MVP. So clearly, it's like weird. Like if you throw a lot of touchdown passes, you might be the MVP of the league. It's crazy how that happens. But there's a lot that goes into this game. Like the Bills are a slight favorite, even though this game is on the road. Lamar Jackson shines when he's an underdog. In his last 10 games as an underdog, he's 7-3 straight up and 9-1 against the spread. The key for this game, though, to me, well, the weather is going to be a part of it. Like it's supposed to be pouring rain all day Sunday in Baltimore. Side note, with that weather forecast, I will be there for the Caesar Sportsbook Truck Tour. We were in Buffalo in week 2. We were at the Colts Chiefs game in week 3, and we are going to be in Baltimore for this game on Sunday. Lamar Jackson also is very good as an underdog in his career. He's 7-3 straight up and 9-1 against the spread as an underdog quarterback. And this is the scorched earth policy that continues for Lamar Jackson. Basically, every game that he plays, he's telling the Ravens the price just went up. Like the line from Liam Neeson in Taken, the price went up 20%. When you dilly-dally a little more, the price just went up. I find it somewhat laughable that the Ravens thought he would take $112 million guaranteed, which was 108 less than Deshaun Watson got. And by any measurable standard, Lamar Jackson has had a more successful quarterback career so far than Deshaun Watson. So the price just keeps going up. And the Ravens at some point either have to decide we're going to pay him that much money or we're going to let someone else pay him that much money.
Yeah.
But I think Lamar at this point has more touchdowns by himself than 30 NFL teams. And I'll just let that sink in.
A little moment of silence there. But yeah, it is certainly a real interesting thing because like you said, are the Ravens going to pay him? Because as we've talked about on the show before, he could do the Kirk Cousins route, right? The franchise tag a couple of years. But then what you do, you're actually putting a ton of pressure on the Ravens to win with him in now only a 2-year window.
It's in the Ravens' best interest if they want Lamar Jackson to be their starting quarterback to pay him and work the contract in a ridiculous way where they can mitigate the salary for the first couple of seasons, much in the same way Patrick Mahomes' salary is being mitigated these last few years from the Kansas City Chiefs. But if they're not going to do that, then they need to cut bait because you don't want a guy occupying $35 to $40 million on your salary cap in money that cannot be moved in any way, shape, or form. Like that's the number.
Yeah.
And now you have this 1-year cap hit of $40 to $45 million, and it just literally hurts everything else you can do for your football team.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we talked about a few of these QB matchups. We got Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen on Sunday. Our 3, and Rachel Wells, our graphic designer, by the way, who puts together that QB selector for us, adding the stadium location, just
2 thumbs up, Rachel. 2 thumbs up.
Rachel.
Applause.
And the rest of the visual team there, Angela and Brian and Ryan, just a great job all around, really enhancing the show this year. Want to throw it again to underdog. I'm a big underdog player. As you know, Trey, you see me post it every single week on Twitter. I post my picks. I also do a lot of I do all my betting on Caesar Sportsbook. I have a good friend who works there. His name is Trey Wingo.
Nice guy. Never met him. Heard of him, though.
Not bad. Yeah, pretty good. So On Underdog, okay, you download the Underdog app because you can get Tua versus Burrow, and in their pick'em game, you can get higher or lower for Tua, 256.5 yards, and for Burrow, 270.5 passing yards, higher or lower. Allen, Josh, it's 285.5 passing yards, higher or lower, and for Lamar Jackson, only 226.5 passing yards, higher or lower. That feels like a sucker bet, by the way, on Lamar Jackson. So again, I want to throw it back to Underdog. How can you make those picks? It's with Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just look for your favorite or least favorite player stats. Pick whether you think they're going to end up with a higher or lower total than that number in this week's game, and you can win up to 20 times, 20x, 20 multiples your money in a single night. It's simple to get started. Just head to underdogfantasy.com or just download the app from your app store. Sign up with promo code PFN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Okay? But wait, there's more. If you deposit $10, not only do you get the match, but you're also going to get a free month subscription to PFN Pass, where you can find all of the More Than Football productions with Trey Wingo, and guests like Tony Boselli, Ryan Clark, Amy Trask, Archie Manning, Ed Werder. You can also get our full feature film documentary, Hopeful, the psyche of the Cleveland Browns fans and sports in the city of Cleveland, in addition to a ton of fantasy betting and other things going on there. So lots to do with Underdog Fantasy and Pro Football Network. Download the app, enter code PFN. Okay, Trey, it's time to wrap up the show with our final segment where we bring it to you, the audience, our fans. And our first question comes from a Brian Mahaffey. He's a YouTube viewer watching the show on YouTube. Are the Bears and Giants game this week the worst possible matchup ever of winning teams?
Yes.
They've completed 23 passes in only 3 weeks, and I think the Giants are just the Giants, whatever that means, and it could get ugly. Trey, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I said this earlier on a radio station in Chicago. If this game doesn't set the record for fewest passes thrown in the NFL, then both coaching staffs should be obliterated. Okay, you have the Giants offense. You have the Giants defense against the Bears rushing attack. And I want to make sure I get this straight. I think the Bears rushing attack is the second best in the NFL, and the Giants rushing defense is the 25th. And they have the Giants rushing offense, which is fourth best in the NFL, and the Bears rushing defense, which is 30th in the NFL. And let's, just for fun, let's throw out the numbers for Justin Fields. Through 3 games, Justin Fields is last in completions, last in pass attempts,
there we go,
last in completion percentage, worst in interception percentage, and last in passer rating at 50.0.
Well, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Right. By the way, the other quarterback in this game, Daniel Jones, the Giants' first-round pick reach in 2019, is the guy who threw the game-clinching interception to his fourth receiver, who was covered by Trayvon Diggs in the Monday night game. Like, if you have your fourth receiver covered by the Cowboys' best corner, look anywhere else. Anywhere else than that matchup. This game could set back offensive football 50 years.
Fantastic. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but you said the Giants' first-round reach quarterback, Daniel Jones.
No, I did that on purpose.
You did? Okay, because it's perfect. Chef's kiss to you on that. Our next question from our audience comes from Tom W. 1984, who's watching us on Twitch. Love all the Twitch viewers, by the way. We have a few questions here from Twitch guys. Thoughts on Hurts and the Eagles? They are the only undefeated, one of 2 undefeated teams. Hurts is having a stellar year, in a year he really needed to prove himself. And what, if anything, does this mean for extension talks with Jalen Hurts?
Well, look, they're the only undefeated team in the NFC, right? There's Miami at 3-0 and the Eagles at 3-0. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. It's only the second time in the last 34 seasons where we've only had 2 teams undefeated through the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
The last time it happened was 2017 when the Chiefs and Falcons were the 2 undefeated seasons. undefeated teams, but hashtag neither one of them won the Super Bowl that year. Just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles have looked great. Jalen Hurts has looked great. It looks like he's never missed leg day, with some of those touchdown runs. And clearly having A.J. Brown there helps. And Devontae Smith showed out this past weekend against the Commanders. Look, you can't win the Super Bowl in September, but you can lose it.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles have done everything correct. And I think that right now you have to look at them. And again, the key words there are right now. You have to look at them right now as the best team in the NFC. But that doesn't mean that's going to be what happens in December and January. So right now, the Eagles are looking as good as you can possibly look. And you and I have said this before, Brett. Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts had by far the most pressure going into this 2022 season because of the draft capital that both teams had. Now, I get it. The Dolphins lost one because of the Tom Brady Tampergate, but they still have a first-round pick and a very rich quarterback draft in 2023. Same way for the Philadelphia Eagles. They have all kinds of options based on what Howie Roseman has done. But right now, Jalen Hurts is basically giving those options the Heisman. He's saying, no, we're good. We're good. We don't need you right now. And their defense, like 9 sacks, 6 in the first half against the Commanders. When Carson Wentz was playing his team that drafted him for the first time, the Eagles look really, really good right now. And by every measurable standard, you have to say, again, with a caveat, it's only September, but right now they look like the team to beat in the NFC.
Yeah. And side note, with all the records he has, the other record that he does have is most gates a part of, and that would be Tom Brady. Now, moving on to our third question here, Pwog or Pwog, if I'm reading it correctly, is another Twitch viewer. This is our final question of the night, and he asks, will my Lions, maybe he's part of the Ford family, push 6 wins or go over or under those 6 wins for the Detroit Lions, who are looking more than just like kneecap biters?
Here's what I'll say about the Lions, and I want to be honest about this. They compete every week. No question. You can make an argument they should be 3-0, but they're not. They're 1-2. And I think that speaks to who they are. I love Dan Campbell. I love his story. I love his motivation. I love his, we are the team that can and will. I buy into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you either win or you don't. It's just that simple. And that was a game in Minnesota that was eminently winnable for them.
Yeah.
And yet they still found a way to lose it. Until they stop doing that shit, I don't see them as anything more than a 5-win team in the NFL. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is great. And Rodrigo is fantastic. And they have a lot of really good players on that team. Now DeAndre Swift is a little banged up. But until you can get out of your own way, I can't believe in you. And for all the positivity and all the we love our coach and all that kind of stuff, they fucked it up on Sunday in Minnesota. Let's just be honest about it. They fucked it up. And until you stop fucking it up, I'm not going to believe in you. So, no, I'm taking the under on the Lions.
Yeah, and that's going on a T-shirt. But absolutely. The growing teams keep it competitive, keep it close. The good teams win. And that's
right.
Really
at some point, like, for example, last year, only the Cowboys had a better record against the spread than the Lions, which is a fancy, metrics way of saying that they believed in their head coach. But at some point, that head coach has got to produce wins. And if you don't, then they stop believing in you. And that was a game against the Vikings that the Lions should have found a way to win. And yet they didn't.
Yeah. Well, hey, that does it for this week's episode of Football Insiders. Both Trey and myself will be here with you next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern live. All of this is available to you on YouTube. We're going to clip it, put it everywhere. Can't wait to see you guys next week. And Trey, as always, man, thank you for making this show what it is. We'll see you next week.
Brett, your glasses and lenses are legendary. Know that.